Welcome back to Virtual School Assembly. Today I'm so pleased to introduce Janice Litvin. In her 20 years as a technology recruiter in Silicon Valley, Janice Litvin helped companies find the best talent at all levels. Now she supports those companies in retaining and engaging their employees with the latest leadership and wellness strategies, and helps ensure those employees show up every day healthy, happy, and ready to work. She's on a mission to help as many people as possible take care of their physical and mental health, including learning to manage stress to prevent burnout and fall in love with fitness. Please welcome to the stage Janice Litvin.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here, Tyler. Well, as I was talking to you earlier, I have a lot of different stories, but one that I think will appeal to your listeners is that I started out as a computer programmer. My mother, who was a recruiter many years ago in oil and gas in Houston, told me that a woman in a technical field would be a huge asset. And I loved math at that time, and I took a computer class in high school, so I've been touching and thinking about computers since I was in high school. And one of the things I've learned, and of course I've learned many lessons over my decades of business life, is that things change. And if I can teach you anything today, it's that there's no way to be ready to change except to stay open and stay resilient. What I mean by that is, let's say you think you want to become an engineer or an architect or a lawyer or a doctor or an artist. Find the passion and then get to know everything you can about the field. It's one thing to go to school for law or architecture or engineering, but it's another thing to work in the field. So my number one best piece of advice is to try to get to know people in that world, either through your parents or through a teacher or even through social media. Try to have an informational interview, or in these days, an informational video interview. There are many, many people on LinkedIn. People love to help young people. So I encourage you to reach out to people that you don't know, and you can message them and say, I see that you're a software engineer for 20 years for Google. I would love to learn how you got there and what you've learned along the way. And then be open to changes, because you never know what life is going to throw at you. So one thing that I learned when I was a programmer at Bank of America is that I really loved people. And obviously I'm pretty outgoing and I'm pretty social. And when I was a programmer, I realized that as a programmer, you're sitting at your desk pretty much alone, unless you're in a meeting or having a design walkthrough, but most of your activity is you and your thoughts and your desk. And I realized at that time that what I really wanted was people. So eventually I became a software support representative, which incorporated going to clients and talking about their software and their problems. And then I also was offered the opportunity to do software training, which I loved. And that's when I learned that I loved to speak and that I loved being up in front of a group of people, and I loved helping people and teaching people. And then eventually I decided that I wanted to work for myself, which is a huge risky proposition, but it can be done if you choose to do it the right way. Again, you need to stay in school and get that degree. And whether you have a passion for art or dance or anything artistic, I encourage you to take as many business classes as you can so that you can learn to run your life. So the story I was about to tell you is that I became self-employed for the purpose of doing software support. After a few years, one of my bosses, the one who allowed me to be a trainer, asked me if I wanted to train some of his people on some new software, because as I said, the theme is change. Software is always changing, as you know. Computers are changing. Our world is about change. And so, yes, I trained some of his people. Then a couple of years after that, he said to me one day, can you find me a DB2 DBA? The DBA, database administrator role, was new, and the DB2 software, mainframe software, was new. And I went through all the steps that I knew to do, and I found someone by placing a tiny little ad in the San Francisco Chronicle. I paid $700 for a 2-line ad, and I found someone. and I enjoyed it and it paid well. So then that kicked off 20 years of being a technology recruiter, which I never planned to do, but all that background in math and computer science helped because I understood technology and I understood the people I was talking to. And yet I was a people person. Yes, Tyler.
Yeah, I'm going to hold you up there for a second. So, can you explain what a technology recruiter is and does? I see that you put in an ad to hire this one person. Is that all recruiters do? Is they put in ads and hire? What does that mean?
That's a really, really interesting question. Speaking of change, back then, way back then, before we had the internet, we didn't even have fax machines, we didn't have email. We used to actually mail resumes, snail mail, and there were some recruiters that would do that. They would place ads and 50 or 100 people would respond, and then we used to call it papering the streets. They would just send 100 or 200 resumes in large white envelopes to all their clients and prospects. That's not what today. Things are completely different. Today we're making relationships on social media such as LinkedIn primarily, and there are a couple of others, and we're making relationships and we're getting to know people as recruiters, getting to know what people's goals are, and then we're keeping a database, and we're helping companies find the best talent of people that are truly passionate about their work and qualified, obviously. So they have to be qualified and passionate about their work.
Okay. So speaking on change then, obviously when you were in high school, you probably weren't thinking, I'm going to be a recruiter one day.
Right.
If you were thinking that, what would you do different if you were a high schooler today? Because obviously technology has changed, access to people has changed. I know, as you mentioned earlier, if you want to get good at something, meet with someone. And my kids have done that. My daughter was doing a science project a few months ago, and she wrote an email to an archaeology professor who was thrilled that someone wanted to work with an archaeology professor on a science project. So not only did he respond, but he got his whole lab to write back, and they helped her with her project. It was
Wow.
huge. And I think most professionals are willing to, if a kid reaches out, we're going to go back. So if you were a kid again, how would you do things different this time around? How would you prepare for the future?
Wow, that's such an interesting question. Well, one of the most important lessons that my mother taught me, may she rest in peace, is that you have to be able to support yourself. And so back in her day, all she cared about was being able to go to the bank. And so she looked down upon artsy endeavors such as music, art, dance, those kind of endeavors.
Mm-hmm.
Today, I would say that if that is one of your passions, you don't have to throw it away, but you have to figure out how you can translate that into a career, which means having the business background. Now, the specific question you asked is, for those of you who might be interested in recruiting, what would I've done differently?
Mm-hmm.
I might have taken more sociology or psychology classes to really understand people and understand some of the techniques and tricks for interviewing. I had to learn it on the fly, so to speak.
Sure.
But I would think that that would be the one area that I would have spent a little more time in, because sometimes you have to read between the lines when you're interviewing someone. And again, this is before face-to-face virtual communication. So I had to be able to read between the lines on the phone. And so really trying to see through the words that people are saying, because a lot of people are really good at interviewing, but they don't have all the true knowledge to back it up.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that really the understanding the people side a little, as much as a people person I am, I could have been better at that piece of it.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting how we live in a world right now where we're doing so much virtually? We're talking to each other right now on a webcam, which is amazing. But when you think back to the opportunities to learn and to grow, a lot of people are making the argument, if we can do this all virtually, we don't need schools anymore, right? We don't need to go places. But what you just said is we need to understand human behavior. We need to understand how humans think and how they work. And what better place than being at school, going to college, for learning how people interact and work. That's a huge reason to keep schools around, is just for that social aspect.
I could talk about that for hours. I took an online, there was a period of time during the recession where I thought I wanted to be a writer because I love to write. Now I am writing, but only as part of my speaking business. But I took a writing class, a business, this was a news writing class. And it was the only way it was offered was online. So I thought, okay, I'll give it a try. The teacher, this is before the video, sending out video lectures. The teacher sent out a 2 or 3 page document, Word doc, that was the lecture of the week. And then we had to go away and write the assignment. And then we could communicate through a message board where you're sending messages to people and giving each other feedback on our documents. It was one of the worst experiences because there was nobody to ask questions of in the moment. And her documents were so brief that it was hard to really understand the steps to take. There's nothing that compares with live, face-to-face, in-person communication so that you can see the faces of the students. And if you're the student, you can see the face of the teacher. You can really feel, and I'm going to call this an electromagnetic wave, but I would love a chemistry person out there to explain to me the chemistry of human communication. I know we have chemicals released in the brain to make us happy and things like that, but I would love to understand what happens in human face-to-face communication. There's nothing that replaces that. Whenever I have a problem with someone that I have to work out, I try to make a face-to-face appointment with them live, because nothing replaces live communication.
I agree. And, we can even see, so we're at a hybrid right now. I can see you, I can hear you. We're not just typing to each other. But because I can see and hear you, I'm going to respond differently. Even seeing how you're dressed, what your background is like, that gives me clues about who you are and what matters to you. And so we interact differently because of that. It's amazing.
Right, right. Something so simple as a smile with a bright eye can make someone feel better. Have you ever met somebody who just doesn't smile and all of a sudden you feel this wall built up and you don't know if it's because they're shy or they feel better than you as a person or what the issues are? But when someone smiles and brightens up their face, then you feel better. You feel emotionally better.
Yeah. All right. So Janice, let's get back to change here for a second.
Okay.
If we're talking to kids, and this might be elementary age kids, but really thinking about high school kids, those who are starting to now prepare for their future, what's the advice that you'd give them living in such an uncertain world? We live in a world that's changing day to day, but also all those things that we thought we could plan on 5 years from now, 10 years from now we're seeing that maybe that might not be the world that we're going to live in. What kind of advice would you give to someone who sees all this uncertainty and wants to still prepare for the future, but can adapt and have change in their life?
The best advice I can give you is not to worry too much about what you're going to major in college. Of course, you have to have a goal, and in many colleges, you have to declare your major before you get there. That's fine, but it's okay to have backup plans or a secondary ideas, and those are the kinds of courses you can take as minors or elective courses. I never, ever dreamt I would end up being a recruiter. And I did take 1 or 2 psychology classes, but I started out majoring in math. That was my path. And as I told you before in my story, I didn't realize what direction that path was going to take. So what I'm saying is be prepared that you may not end up in the job you're planning for today. You may not end up there 20 years from now, 10 years from now, 5 years from now, 2 years from now. And when I say now, I mean from your freshman year in college. It's okay if you're not 100% sure what you want to do, think about what you love to do, because the best lesson that I ever learned is that people do well in things they love, in subjects and topics they love. So if you love history, consider majoring in history. If you love math, so figure out what you love, because that's where you'll excel. and be prepared to formulate that into a career with other tributaries along your path.
That's great advice. Thanks. I want to step back even further then. So you talked about preparing for college and thinking about declaring a major. I'm on board with that. In fact, my first degree, my bachelor's degree was in sociology because it was interesting, not because it was going to lead to a job.
Yeah.
And then my second degree was in education, which I did become a teacher. But then my third degree was in psychology, again, because it was interesting to me.
Right.
And that has served me well. In fact, I found that a lot of things that interested me in elementary school and high school, I'm now in my 40s returning to those things. In fact, just last week, I posted my first ever music video. I haven't done music since I was in high school, you
Wow, I
know?
can't wait to watch.
And so it's I did it with my kids, and it was just a cheesy COVID song. We were parodying Neil Diamond,
Oh, I
but
want to see that.
I'll send you the link. But it's interesting how we return to what we loved, what we're passionate about as kids. Now, I want you to, again, to go back to high school, thinking
Okay.
about getting ready for college. So a lot of kids are stressed out about college prep and testing really high. But one thing that you said I think really resonates is find out what you're passionate about, find out what you love. How do you do that? How do you figure out what you love?
Wow. That's quite an interesting question. That's really, I could go away and think about that for an hour and then come back. How do you figure out what you love? Think about how you feel when you're, let's just say when you're either listening to a specific lesson, math, science, history, or you're doing that homework. How do you feel when you're doing that homework? How do you feel after you've completed a project? Of course, you always have a satisfaction from a completion,
Mhm.
but when you think back at the end of the day, each day when after you're doing your homework, and I hope you are still doing your homework even though you're at home, how do you feel? How does thinking about that subject make you feel? Look at the kinds of books you read. How do you feel from the different types of characters? And by the way, one thing that I learned as someone who loves to write is to learn to love to read. And I believe me, I understand very acutely that not every child loves to read because they're reading what everybody else is assigning. And sometimes history's boring. Maybe you struggle with math. You don't like the literature you're being assigned to. After you get out of that situation or during your summer breaks, try to find the kinds of books that you love. Try to read books about what you think you might have a passion for. Read about a famous ballerina if you want to be a ballerina. Read about the life of a famous artist. Look at how they feel, what they were going through. Read the history of some of the Impressionists, for example, if you want to be an artist. And again, my big advice to myself that I realized early on in life is that I learned the most from talking to other people. So I would say talking to other people, of course, you're doing it virtually now, and we are physical distancing. We are not social distancing. That's a big joke we have in our family. Find other people to talk to. Maybe it's a friend's older sibling who's in college, or a friend's older cousin who's just graduated and now they're starting their job in law or engineering or whatever it is you're interested in. Try to talk to people and read as many books that you love to read, and you will figure out, based on the books that you find that you love to read, they could be business books, they could be nonfiction books. My son, who's 26, who hated reading, and I always worried, how's he going to get anywhere in life if he doesn't learn to read and learn to love to read? Now he reads every single day, but he's choosing the topics he wants to read about. And in his case, he's learning about business online, and he's a rapper, so he's reading about other successful rappers. And so figure out what it is that you are passionate about through reading and talking to other people. That's a long-winded answer.
Great advice. Thanks, Janice. Before we wrap up here, I've got one last question for you. you've been able to do some amazing things throughout your life, and you've seen the impact of different changes, some changes that you could control, some changes that you couldn't control.
Right.
Um, if if you were to give advice to yourself, if you went back several years and found yourself as a kid and could say, this is one thing that will make a difference in your life, change this one little thing, what's the tweak that you would take action on? What's the one little thing?
There's nobody that knows you better than you. Of course, you're influenced by your parents and your teachers and your community leaders, and that's all valuable and important. But only you know who you are as a human being. And if you're still young and you're not sure what your path is, begin to journal. Begin to take a pen, not finger typing on your phone, a pen and a piece of paper, and get one of the empty notebooks in your house and start to journal. The best way to get to know yourself is to ask yourself. When you journal, first of all, you get feelings and thoughts that are all jumbled up inside your head on paper. And then when you go back the next day and read those notes, you're looking at it from a more analytical point of view, and then it helps you think of other things. So my best advice of everything I've said today is to journal every single night.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for so much for your time today, Janice. It's been wonderful hearing from you and learning from you. If people want to learn more about who you are and what you do, how would they find out more or get a hold of you?
Thank you. Well, I'll answer that with two sentences. First of all, my website address is www.janicelitvin.com. That's spelled lit like lit the light, vin like vino, VIN, www.janicelitvin.com. I'm on LinkedIn, and I would very much welcome hearing from any and all of you on LinkedIn. It's Janice Litvin, Workplace Wellness Speaker, because I love helping other people. I love helping young people. Please feel free to ask me any questions. If you're working on a resume or you're working on a project and you just want some advice from another adult who's got a lot of years of experience, I'd be happy to help anybody who asks. All you have to do is ask. And the way you do that is you click connect on LinkedIn, and then you send me the message, and I forget how many 180 or however many characters you have to send me a message, and include your phone number or your email, and I'll write you back as soon as I can. And I want to just say one more quick thing, and that is I am a wellness speaker, and I got there, like I told you, life brings you a lot of different changes. On the next video, I'll tell you exactly how I got there, but all I want to say is you never know where you're going to end up, so don't stress about it too much.
Cool. Thanks, Janice.